We have a 2004 Volkswagen Passat 1.8 liter turbo. We're gonna do a real quick video on a timing belt replacement. In this video I'm not gonna turn the camera off or cut anything out, so whatever you see is the whole job start to finish. We're gonna take the wheels off. He's got a wheel lock in there. Now take the bolts out of the wheel liner to hold the bumpers up. You have another bolt going up into the fender. The T20 Torx. Now we're gonna remove the grill. T30 Torx bolts. Only two side bolts we need to remove. Then I need to remove the hood popper. Be very careful not to break this thing. Gotta unclip the securing clip, stick a screwdriver in there, and spread the fins. Very careful not to break it. If you do break it, don't worry about it. Well, you're gonna have a problem opening the hood, but this thing is relatively cheap. It's like $5 in the dealership. Now we're gonna need to, there's a clip over here in the center. Pry the grill up a little bit so this clip comes out. It has another two clips on the sides and 4 or 5 clips on the bottom. So pry it up like this and try to go straight up with the bumper, over the grill. Don't force it. If it doesn't want to go, it means the clips are stuck inside the bumper. See, there's clips over there. One more over here, one more over here, one more over here. The side clip, this one is broken. You got 2 more clips holding the bumper. We're gonna use a 90-degree pick. Gonna carefully stick it inside the bumper and unclip this little clip. Once again, be very careful. Those clips are very easy to break. You could see a little. Yes, our glue was out. Set the grill aside, don't scratch it. We got 4 more T30 Torx bolts holding the bumper down. Take them out. your bumper cover is free to come out. Just slide the bumper forward. Make sure it's not getting caught on anything. Oh, we have a belly pan under the car holding the bumper. Lift the car up. Just lifting the car up is the longest that it takes. Grab a screwdriver. Take the clips out of the belly pan. It's not there. We're gonna remove the belly pan completely. You have one more 10mm nut in the center. That way when we're going to be draining our coolant, it's not going to go on the belly pan. 50mm bolt holding the belly pan in the center. You're probably going to have a clip. That bolt is not supposed to be there. Somebody put her in. Bolt comes with a nut. Yep. Belly pan's out. Bring the car back down. And you could take the bumper off. Once again, slide it forward. There's connectors on the fog lights, if you do have fog lights, and the side markers. They just pull them out. Disconnect the fog lights. Be careful not to break it. It's better off if you have somebody helping you. That way you don't need to have a chance of the bumper falling down. Those connectors. Bumper's off. Put her on the floor. Really carefully not to scratch it. Now we're gonna remove this little bumper reinforcement. It's more of a bumper bracket, not a reinforcement. Once again, same T30 bolts. See, they have a little head in there. Those bolts are from this reinforcement in the bumper. Take it off, set it aside. Now we're gonna unbolt the radiator support, the one with the bumper support. It's a T30 bolt. There's gonna be 3 on the left side, and 4 on the left side and 3 on the right side. If nobody put an extra bolt in there or took some out, that's because on the right side you have a tow hitch attached to your radiator and bumper support. Remove the intercooler shroud, press on this tab downwards, and on the bottom you have a little clip over here. You need to pry the bottom of it off. Yep, you have 2 of those. Slide her off the horn, set her aside. Now you have access to your bolts. See, this is the hook I'm talking about. That's why it's 4 bolts on this side. Now grab the T30 Torx once again. There's fender brackets holding on to the radiator support. Windshield washer tank. Make sure when you put the bolts back in, the bolts with the small washer go into the fender bracket. The bolt with the big washer is from the tank. Now remove these two bolts that hold the red support to the fenders. Be careful, hold on to the red support so it doesn't fall down and break any hoses. Now, nice ones, slide it off. You might want to remove the intake as well. Three Phillips screws in there, if nobody replaced them. Don't lose them. So when you put everything back together, it's nice and original. I'm gonna bring the car a little bit more down. So it's more space, easier to work on. Just slide the red support out just a little bit. Then I need to remove the intake hose off the throttle body. Take this cover off. When you're taking the cover off, it has 2 clips on the sides, clip into the power steering tank. Might have another clip over here, clipping onto the bracket. So be careful, don't break it. Screwdriver. Take the clamp off the throttle body. Now we're gonna grab a 90-degree pick, lift up this little clip on the intercooler, so let's our pipe out. Now wiggle the pipe, take it out, take it off the throttle body. We'll take this hose off so we gain access to the bolt on a clutch fan. Now 17mm wrench, put on a belt tensioner, take the belt off the alternator. $8mm hex. You need to stick it. There's a bolt behind the fan pulley. 8mm hex. So stick it in there. Use my little pliers to counter hold the pulley. Make sure not to scratch the pulley. So grab onto it pretty tight. Make sure you don't scratch it or you might damage the belt. Now take the fan off real carefully. If the fan hits the radiator, you might puncture it very easily, so take it off carefully. Alright, now 6mm hex. We're gonna loosen the bolts on a AC belt tensioner. So we could take the belt off. Make sure your socket goes in all the way. Loosen that one. And the upper bolt, we're gonna need to take out completely. Yep. Don't lose this bolt. See, the one with 2 washers is the upper bolt from the AC belt tensioner. Let's strain some weight in there. Now we could take both belts off with the AC belt tensioner hanging there. .13mm bolts to take out the tensioner. Get the tensioner off. Now get this cover off the engine. Set it aside, don't break it. Get the hoses over the cover onto the valve cover like this. Make sure you unclip the cover first. This one you could just take out and hang it loose like this. Take the timing bolt cover off. Now we're gonna need to put it on top of that center and take the crankshaft pulley off. Always spin the motor clockwise only. Take your time, don't force it too much. Let the compression escape when you're spinning the motor. Put it on the marks of the camshaft. You got a little notch over here in the valve cover and a notch in the pulley. You got another notch on the crankshaft pulley, and a little notch is barely noticeable on that cover over here of the timing belt cover. Yep. Now you might want to counter hold the pulley and use a wrench to take the bolts out of the crank pulley. I have this impact side ratchet. So there's 4 bolts, 6mm Allen key bolts holding the pulley, the crank pulley. Put the socket in. Make sure you put the socket in all the way. If I would be you, I would knock it in with a little hammer or pliers or something like that. Just because if you strip that bolt, it's gonna be a little project to get it out. So very carefully knock the socket in all the way. Now we'll put a yep. Make sure you do not strip these bolts. It will be a pain to get them out. guys get stuck onto the come on. Just fill the bolts in there. Put the socket in. Knock the socket in. Yep. Before you take the last bolt out, make sure your engine is still atop that center. Which is not. And move just a bit. Move it back to top that center. Like that. Take the last bolt out. See the pulley move just a bit again before you wiggle the pulley off. Make sure it's on the marks. Yep. Now we could take the crank pulley off. Pulley's off. Now we're gonna take the timing belt covers, the rest of them out. 10mm socket. There's 3 bolts holding the upper cover and 2 more bolts holding the lower cover. Take them all out. Set the bolts aside. This upper cover has a little tab that holds onto the water pump housing. So when you're taking it out, you gotta twist it backwards just a bit. Yep. See, this is the tab I was talking about. Now we got complete access to our timing belt components. As of our engine is on top that center, what I do is I mark the tooth of the belt right over there, the one that's lining up with this little thing on the front seal cover. I'll explain in a second why I do that. Make sure you use something that is not gonna get washed off easily, or don't spray the chemicals directly at the thing that you're marking. Otherwise you're gonna need to put the covers back on to realign it. Now we're gonna remove the hydraulic tensioner, the tensioner roller, and the water pump. The tensioner is held by 2 10mm bolts. I remove the upper one first, and the lower one, and the belt is loose. Do not lose any bolts in here, like I just did. Now a 13mm knot that's holding onto the timing belt pulley. And oops, don't lose the washer. Washer has to go back in. And take the pulley with the belt off. Our timing belt is off. Find the washer. Make sure you don't lose it. Now I'll put something under the car to catch the coolant. And take the water pump bolts out. Make sure you release the pressure if you've been driving the car recently from your coolant tank, and leave it open. And you take the 3 bolts that hold down the water pump out. Now twist the water pump just a bit up, and now you could, there's a tab on the water pump, you could stick a screwdriver and pull it out, pry it off. And a bigger screwdriver. Let the coolant out. See, we're missing a tooth on the water pump. We have a crack over here. What was going on with this car is, at certain temperature, this car would warm up and start overheating, because this crack over here allows the pulley to spin, well, the pump to spin without the pulley spinning. So yeah, we have a water pump failure right here. Now blow the coolant off the engine. As of the water pump, we found that it's missing a piece. Stick your hands all over the place inside the water pump housing and try to see where that piece went. If it went into the block, you're okay, it's probably not coming back, but make sure it's not sitting, there's a thermostat down there, make sure it's not sitting somewhere by the thermostat, because it will come back and break your new pump. So take a mirror and inspect the water pump housing. Well, our piece is nowhere near to be found. It's probably stuck somewhere in the block. As of the water pump only pumps one way, most likely this piece is definitely not coming back to the pump, so we're good to go. Now we could clean this area. Remember, we marked this tooth over here. We're gonna clean the area and wash it off probably. So we're gonna need to remark it again, but make sure this crank pulley did not move. This is very important. You could bend the valves if it did move. Try to take as much coolant out of the water pump housing as possible so it doesn't drip down little by little. Okay, now grab a new water pump. Now I use original water pumps only, just because I used to use those plastic impeller or metal impeller pumps aftermarket, because the plastic impellers keep on breaking, and they ended up making pumps so cheap now that they start leaking after like 400 miles. So grab a new pump, lubricate.
Open end.
Lubricate this thing. Give me a couple of minutes, man.
Oh yeah, no problem, no problem.
And put the pump back in. When you're putting the pump in, do it in a twisting motion so you don't damage the O-ring. Make sure you lubricate it.
Oh, you're a good man. Good man.
Alright, now grab the water pump bolts. Put a little bit of thread lock on them, just in case. Use a little bit of thread lock on all the bolts in the timing belt area. Make sure your pump is in all the way before you put the bolts in. If you didn't put the pump in all the way, you will damage the O-ring and it will be leaking. So make sure your pump is sitting flat, flush on the block before you put the bolts in. Just make sure the bolts are tight. That's it. Now grab a new tensioner. Put that on. Don't tighten it. Just put it on by hand. Now remark that tooth on a crankshaft pulley. This is why we did it. What I usually do is I move the crankshaft backwards, just one tooth. That way when you put the belt on and you tighten this side of the belt, the water pump side of the belt, it's gonna go back on that spot. And you need to make sure that the marked tooth is aligned with this thing, well, whichever you marked. So grab the new belt, put on the crankshaft first, make sure it goes into all the teeth. Water pump, tensioner pulley, and put it onto the camshaft. Now see, the belt is loose on this side, so when we're gonna stick the tensioner in over here and tighten up the belt, this tooth over here, see, it's misaligned a little bit right now. It's gonna come into the spot where it needs to be. Grab a new tensioner. Make sure you replace these tensioners every time you do the timing belt job, or you will have a problem. need to get my bolt from the tensioner out from the Yep. Now a little bit of a thread lock. Not a bolt. Oh, it's still in the tensioner. Not too much, just a bit. Now lift up the tab of the tensioner pulley up and slide the bottom of the hydraulic tensioner in first. There's a notch in there for the little fin on the tensioner, so slide that notch in first, flat against the block, and try to put a bolt through the tensioner. Yep. Make sure you find the threads. Definitely you don't want to mess up the threads in there. And now put the second bolt in. Like, you gotta slide the tensioner inward and find that hole. Yep, we got both bolts in. Make sure they're tight. Okay, now we have this little special tool with two pins to pre-tighten the tensioner pulley. Usually put it in like right past the nut, the bolt on the camshaft pulley. That's how it's supposed to be. If you put it around like this, it's not going to be tight enough. Your tensioner is going to expand all the way and the belt is not going to be tight enough. If you over tighten it, your tensioner is not going to come out of the cylinder. The hydraulic tensioner is not going to come out of the cylinder, and first it's going to be making noise, second your belt is going to be over tightened. So put her up right past the bolt on the camshaft pulley and tighten up that nut. It's a 13mm nut. It's supposed to be tightened to about 20 foot-pounds of torque. Now there's a 8mm hex hole in the tensioner pulley. Grab a wrench, put an Allen key in there, pre-tighten the belt, and grab another wrench and do 2 turns of the engine. We'll do that so we don't have to take the pin out of the hydraulic dampener first. Pre-tighten it so you have about maybe 5mm of the tensioner head, like this much. Now crank the engine 2 times. Make sure you don't crank it with the key. If you start to turn the engine over and you feel some resistance, like it's bottoming out somewhere, you got a problem. Do not force it. Go back and check your timing marks. To do that, put the lower timing belt cover on and make sure you're lower timing belt cover on the crank pulley, and make sure your marks do align. Yep, the top one is on, the bottom one is right there. So now we could pull the pin off of the hydraulic dampener, take the Allen key out of the tensioner pulley, and do the same thing again. Yep, the top one is on, the bottom one is on as well. That's it. We can put the covers back in and assemble the whole thing. Now clean the covers. Put the bottom cover in first. 2 10mm bolts. Clean the upper cover. Now it's gonna be 3 bolts. Remember, there's a little tab over here. So slide it behind the water pump first, just like this, and then it's gonna sit down nice and tight. If you won't slide the cover in, it's gonna be hitting the water pump. This cover is not going to be aligned properly. It's going to have holes, so something could get through and damage your belt, or it's going to damage the belt itself. So make sure the cover sits in like it was born there. All the parts in this car are made exact. So if you see that something's sticking out or not aligning properly, it's probably because you're not putting it in right. Okay, now our 4 6mm hex bolts. Now these things, you must put thread lock onto them. I've seen a lot of times where these bolts get loose even with the thread lock, so make sure they tight, make sure they have thread lock on them. Now the crank pulley has an alignment hole over here and a little pin right there. So align the pin with the hole, put it on. First put all the bolts in by hand. Make sure your bolts are not damaged. I'm gonna use my impact driver to put the bolts back in. you gotta make sure they tight. And make sure when you put in the socket into the bolts, it's in all the way. You do not want to strip them. Believe me, you don't. Don't forget to tighten any of them. Now, to just make sure that you did everything good and properly, do another turn of the motor, check the timing marks again. Better safe than sorry. Yep. We're right on marks. Now clean the upper cover up. Nice and clean. Slide it under the hose. There is tabs where it goes into. Make sure it's sitting nice and tight, like I said before, like it's been born there. Now take this hose of the valve cover and clip the cover on. Put the vacuum hose from the diverter valve back in. Slide the hose into the holders. Now we're all set. To make your life easier, put the accessory belt in first, the alternator belt onto the crank pulley. That way you could put the seat belt on right now without the tensioner and the fan in the way. So put the belt onto the AC and the tension and the crankshaft. Oh man, it's a little tight on space. Just work yourself around all your obstacles. Yep. Now grab that bolt with two washers from the AC belt tensioner. Find a little hole where it goes into. Put her in by hand. Do not tighten it yet. Now grab a 17 or 18, 17 millimeter wrench. Oops, too tight. tighten up the belt for the AC. There's a little slot where it goes onto. Tighten the belt up, tighten the bolts, and tighten the other bolt from the tension out. So your AC belt is on, make sure it's tight, nice and nice. Now we're gonna put the alternator belt tensioner on. Three 13mm bolts. Now we're going to reinstall the fan clutch. Now put the belt around the power steering pulley and under the fan clutch like this. Put the clutch on. There's a 8mm hex holding it down. From the other side, don't lose that bolt. It's a fine thread bolt. You will have a problem finding another one. Okay, now counter hold the pulley. Make sure you don't grab the belt. Yep, tighten up. Good. 17mm wrench. Put on a tensioner. Tighten up the tensioner. Put the belt on the alternator. It's all said and done. At this point, should probably start the car up, check to make sure everything is running good, no problems. We're gonna continue on. Now we're gonna need to put the intake pipe back on. Make sure this clip is down, it's clipped in. There's only one position the pipe goes into the intercooler due to those aligning tabs, so make sure you slide it in. It's supposed to click like that. Tighten up the clamp on the throttle body. Good. Now slide the radiator support back onto its place. Yep. Grab one of those big washer bolts, put it on each side. So your red support stays in place. Now line everything back where it needs to be. Clip the wires back on. Put the cover back on. You could now put the T45 Torx bolts into the radiator support. Now bring it up, Stick the bolts in by hand. Do not tighten them yet. Put them in, all of them in first. One more very important thing. This wire over here from the high pressure switch from your AC. There's a clip behind the red support that's supposed to be holding the wire to the red support over here behind the under the headlight. If this clip is missing, this wire could go in between your body of the car and the red support. If you tighten it up, you will damage the wire, blow out fuses, and could melt your wiring harness under the dashboard. So make sure that wire from your high pressure switch did not get caught between the body and the radiator support. Now grab a T45 torch. There is a, you could see the markings under the bolt where it used to be. Make sure you align it with those markings. Tighten one bolt, only one bolt on each side, because if you tighten more than one bolt, you will not be able to align it anymore. So make sure you align it, one bolt on each side, then tighten the rest of the bolts. Now we have these 3 bolts for the fenders, T30 Torx. They have 2 with the small washers, 1 with the big washer. The small washers go on the fender brackets. The bigger washer bolt goes on onto the tank, the windshield washer tank. Now, I always forget to put this thing in. I want to put it in now, so I don't have to remove the radiator. So put the shroud back in. Slide it in up top first, and then clip the bottom. Make sure you have your fog light plug out. Now the same thing with these bolts. Realign them where they used to be, so your headlights align properly with the fenders. Put the seals in like they were. Reinstall the intake. 3 Phillips screws. The airbox cover. Put the engine cover back on. Have the turns on those clips. Now we're gonna reinstall the bumper bracket. These T30 bolts. Make sure it goes up all the way to your headlight. This is like a little headlight support to make sure that your bumper is tight with the headlight all around. Now it's time to put the bumper back on. The side markers, see this little like a tab over here? This is up and down. I'll actually the sides. So don't force it in if it's not going in. You probably didn't align it properly. Oops. Have somebody help you with the bumper. One. Putting it on alone is kind of hard. Connect the fog lights and slide the bumper in. Make sure it slides in nice and flush everywhere. Now put the 4 bolts that hold the bumper up in, the T30 Torx. Now put the grill in. See these clips? They go into the holes in the bumper. And just make sure all the clips, the ones on the sides, the one over here in the center, align. Just press the grill down and it's gonna clip in. Got 2 more T30 bolts on each side of the grill. Then you need a screwdriver. Stick the hood popper in, align it with the pins, and spread the little tabs in this popper. Push the lock in, clip the securing clip on, make sure it's working properly. You're pretty much all set. All you need to do is put the actually, you gotta pull the bumper down. T20 Torx. Pull the wheel liner down to the bumper. Don't forget the bolt that goes upwards into the bumper. Yep. Now put the wheels on. Do the other side. Now lift the car up, put the pellet pan back on. Remember I had a bolt instead of a clip in the center. Let's try to start it. Runs like a champ. Now bleed the coolant system and you're all set. The coolant system is bled at the heater core outlets. Gotta take this cover off. You gotta pull this hose off right until the point that this hole is not gonna be on the pipe. Use a little 90-degree pick to go under the hose to unglue the hose from the pipe. Make sure you don't damage the hose or the pipe. Hell with the hose, make sure you don't damage the pipe, because then you're gonna need to, this is the heater core, you're gonna need to take the dashboard out to fix that. Make sure the hole is there, and now fill the coolant up until you see coolant coming out from that hole. It's out there. Now you can start the car, so it circulates the coolant and kind of pushes it through, because it will take a lot of time for it to push all the air out. But don't let the car get hot, because it will start overheating. So start it up, let it run, and make sure it circulates. Just make sure the coolant level is higher than your tank. So use a funnel of some sort, so it pushes the coolant through the system. When we see we're not getting any circulation, we're going to turn the car off and let it push the coolant through. Like I said before, don't get the car hot, because it will overheat if there is air pockets in the system. Alright, we see coolant coming out of there. What we do is we squeeze this upper radiator hose up, so it pushes the air out of the system, and close the hole in the heater core so it sucks some of the fluid in. That way you could fill up the system. Now we're gonna start the car up again. Okay, I'll bring the RPMs up to about 2000. Watch the temperature gauge and make sure you get heat. If you're not getting heat, and the heat was working before, it means you have an air pocket in the system, and you need to turn it off and let it sit for a while. Just put the heat on high, bring the RPMs up to about 2500, and feel the heat. Because if the car is cold, it needs to warm up first in order for us to feel any heat. So watch the temperature gauge. If the car is getting warm and you're not getting any heat, go and bleed her again. We see the temperature rising. So is the heat getting a little warmer. This means we get circulation through the system. If your air out of your vents coming out warm and getting warmer and warmer with the temperature going up, you can shut the car off. Take it for like a 10-15 minute drive while watching on the temperature gauge. By the time you're done, you must have heat, and it must be hot at all times. If you stop and your heat starts getting cooler to the point like being cold, it means you still have air in there. Go out and drive it more. And that would be it. That would conclude our timing belt job video.